More than 1 in 24 people later proven innocent by DNA, cleared, walked out, the real guy found years later, had confessed out loud to a crime they didn't do. Sit with that for a second. Most of them weren't beaten into it. They were talked into it. In a small room, door shut, a metal table between them and someone very calm and very good at their job. And the thing that could have stopped almost every one of those confessions, 4 words. 4 plain, ordinary words. And most people never use them because they think they already know the move. Stay quiet. Say nothing. You've heard it your whole life. You have the right to remain silent. But here's what nobody tells you at the kitchen table. Going quiet doesn't work the way you think it does. There's a Supreme Court case, a real one, where a man stayed silent at exactly the wrong moment, and that silence got used against him in court. Silence done wrong is a trap, and those 4 words that actually shut the door, most people say the opposite of them, politely, nervously, while the recording light is still on.
That light's almost always on now. Body cameras, dash cameras, the little recorder sitting on the table between you. Everything you say is being kept somewhere. And most people, when they finally sit down in that room, do the one thing that feels polite and reasonable and completely human. They explain themselves. You're 31. Maybe you did something small. Maybe you did nothing at all and you generally don't know why you're there. The officer is friendly, gets you a coffee in a thin paper cup, says they just need to clear a couple things up. And honestly, the fastest way out of this room is to talk it through. So you talk, because you're innocent, or close enough. And innocent people explain. That's the instinct. That's the trap. And here's the gap nobody walks you through. The rights you're picturing, the cop show words, you have the right to remain silent, anything you say can and will be used against you, those have a name, Miranda. They don't switch on the second a cop looks at you. They switch on only when 2 things are true at the exact same time. You're in custody, meaning a normal person in your shoes wouldn't feel free to stand up and walk out, and they're questioning you. Both at once. So picture the part before that. The friendly chat. The, hey, you're not under arrest. You're free to go anytime. We just have a couple questions. In that moment, in the eyes of the law, you're not in custody. No warning is required. Nobody has to read you a thing. And whatever happens in that room, what you say and what you don't say, is fair game later. That second part is the one that ruins people. Because there's a Supreme Court case, a real one, where a man was answering an officer's questions at a station, not arrested, free to leave, and when one particular question landed, the one that actually mattered, he just went quiet. Didn't say I'm done, didn't say I want this to stop, said nothing, just sat there. And at his trial, the prosecutor stood up in front of the jury and pointed right at that silence. An innocent man, he said, would have jumped up and gone, "What? No, that wasn't me." This man went still instead. And the court said that was allowed. His silence in that easy pre-arrest conversation got carried into the courtroom and stacked up as evidence against him. Read that twice. Staying quiet in the wrong setting at the wrong moment can be made to look exactly like guilt. And the law lets them say so out loud to the people deciding your life. Now, I want to be straight with you because this is where I peel off from basically every other legal channel on this site. The popular advice is 2 words. Don't talk. Don't say anything to the police ever, end of story. And I understand why people repeat it. It comes from a good place, and for a lot of folks, it's better than the alternative. But just clamming up, going limp and quiet, and hoping it somehow reads as "I know my rights," that is not the shield people think it is. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the silence is the very thing that gets used to bury you. The protection was never the quiet. The protection is in what you actually say. And there's a second wrinkle that catches everybody off guard. In about 24 states, call it half the country, there are laws on the books that say if an officer stops you and has a real reason to suspect you're mixed up in something, you have to give them your name. Not your story, not where you were last night, your name. Refuse it in one of those states, and that refusal alone can get you arrested. So even the cleanest little "I'm staying silent" comes with an asterisk that depends on which state's sidewalk you happen to be standing on. You start to see the real shape of this thing. People believe there's one simple rule: stay quiet. And it's a wall. It's not a wall, it's a door. A door only does its job if somebody actually closes it, on purpose with the right hand on the latch. So what does closing it take? Turns out, not silence. Words, specific ones, said plainly out loud with no maybe and no I think and no nervous little question mark hanging off the end. Because, and this is the part that honestly stopped me cold the first time I read through the cases, the courts have decided that being sort of silent or kind of asking for a lawyer or mumbling something that clearly means you want this over, none of it counts. You can sit in a room and not speak a single word for hours and have legally invoked nothing at all. There's a man whose whole case proves that. He sat through an interrogation that ran close to 3 hours, barely made a sound the entire time. And he thought, you'd think it too, anybody would, that all that silence was him using his right. The court saw it the complete opposite way. They said the silence meant nothing because he never spoke the words. And the one short answer he finally gave right near the end, after all those quiet hours in that little room, that's the answer they convicted him on. And the maddening part is how close he came to the right move. All he had to do at any point in those hours was open his mouth and say it clearly, "I'm done talking," or "I want a lawyer." He never did. He stayed quiet, and quiet in that room is just not the same thing as invoking your right. The court's reasoning, when you strip it down, is almost cold in how simple it is. How, they asked, is an officer supposed to know that silence means I'm using my right, or not I'm thinking, or I'm scared, or I'm figuring out what to say next? So they drew a hard line. If you want the questions to stop, you have to say so, plainly. The burden sits on you, not them. 2 hours and 45 minutes. That's the real number, not a while, not a long interrogation. Nearly 3 hours of a man sitting in a chair believing his silence was a wall around him, while the law treated it as an open door the entire time. And these sessions, by the way, run a lot longer than people picture. There's no built-in clock, no hour limit where a buzzer goes off and you get to go home. They end when the officer decides they end, or when you end them. There's a second case that, I'll be honest with you, I had to read twice before I believed it. A man in the middle of being questioned said out loud, "Maybe I should talk to a lawyer. Maybe I should talk to a lawyer." Sounds like asking for a lawyer, doesn't it? The court said no, not clear enough, too soft. That one word, maybe, sank him. Because he hedged, the officers had no legal duty to stop, so they didn't. They kept right on going, and everything that came after came in. Sit with how thin that line is. One word, same room, same questions, same bad Tuesday afternoon. One person says 4 flat words and means them, and at that exact moment, the law says the questioning has to stop cold. The other person says, maybe I should get a lawyer. Voice tipping up at the end the way it does when you're not even sure you're allowed to ask. Same fear in both, same instinct. But one of those sentences shuts the door and the other one doesn't. And the only real difference between them is a maybe and a nervous little question mark. One of those people goes home thinking it over with a lawyer. The other sits there answering questions for 2 more hours and hands them the thing that ends up in the file. That's the machine. It isn't a trick question or a hidden clause. It's just a standard, a clear, almost brutal standard that says a soft ask is the same as no ask, and a silent mouth is the same as a willing one. Unless you are unmistakable, you have not done the thing you think you've done.
Now, let me knock down the other belief, because the popular version of all this is wildly oversold. People think that if the police don't read you your rights, the whole case gets thrown out. You walk, case dismissed, see you never. That is not how it works, and it's not close. A missing warning doesn't blow up the case. At most, at the absolute most, it can keep the words you said out of your trial. And even that's only if you were actually in custody. Only if it gets challenged the right way, only sometimes. The arrest stands, the other evidence stays. So they never read my rights is not the golden ticket the internet has been selling you for 20 years. I wish it were that easy. It isn't. Here's where I'll give the cops their due too, because I don't want this to turn into everyone in a uniform is out to get you. Most stops aren't this. Most encounters are a few minutes on the side of a road and you drive off annoyed and fine. The room with the table and the recorder is a small slice of police contact, not the whole of it. But it's the slice with the highest cost. It's the one where an ordinary, innocent person, talkative person, can lose years of their life over a conversation they thought was helping them. And the people most likely to fall into it are exactly the ones who feel they have nothing to hide. Because if you've got nothing to hide, why would you ever stop talking? That's the psychology the whole room is built around. Your decency is the lever. So if silence doesn't do it on its own, and a nervous half question doesn't do it, and the thing you saw on TV is a myth, then what actually works?
works. There is an answer. It's short. It's been sitting right there in plain sight in these decisions the entire time, hiding inside the same cases that sank those men. And once you hear it said the right way, you genuinely can't unhear how badly most people fumble it in the moment that counts. 4 words. I want a lawyer.
That's the whole thing. Not clever, not Latin, not some phrase your cousin who watches court TV swears by. 4 flat words said the way you'd order at a counter. No, maybe, no, I think, no voice tipping up at the end into a question. And here's why the people who study this reach for the lawyer line instead of I want to stay silent, even though both are yours to use. There's a case, real and unanimous, all 9 justices agreed, that says the moment you clearly ask for a lawyer, the questioning has to stop and they can't circle back and try you again later. Not in an hour, not the next morning, not until a lawyer is actually sitting there beside you, unless you are the one who restarts the conversation. Asking for the lawyer doesn't just pause the room, it locks the door from your side. A lot of people go one step further and say both halves out loud. Something like, I'm staying quiet and I want a lawyer. And there's a real reason for that first half. Remember the man whose silence got turned against him in the easy pre-arrest chat? Saying it, actually saying I'm not answering that, is the thing he never did. You don't earn the silence by being silent. You earn it by announcing it out loud on the recording. Now, the second you say the words, the room changes. The friendliness usually cools. And sometimes you'll hear a version of, a lawyer just makes you look guilty, or I can't help you once you lawyer up, or this is your one shot to tell your side. That right there is the whole ballgame, because the part of that unanimous case people forget is this. The protection holds only if you don't reopen the door yourself. If they keep needling and you crack and start explaining again, you just handed it back. So what the people who actually hold the line do is almost boring. They say the words once and then they stop. They don't argue, they don't defend why they ask for a lawyer. They get quiet and they let it be awkward.
Out on the street, it's a little different. If an officer stops you and you're not sure where you stand, the question people ask is plain. Am I free to go? If the answer is yes, the encounter's done. You can walk. If it's no, you're being detained. And in about half the states we talked about, that's when you may have to give your name. Just the name. Then the same 4 words, but, and please really hear this one because a title like the one on this video always promises more than the law actually hands you, those 4 words end the interrogation. They do not end the arrest. They don't stop a search the officer already has the right to make. They don't swing the door open and let you stroll out to the parking lot. You might still get booked, printed, held overnight. The door you're closing is the interrogation door, the one where you talk yourself into a hole. That's a real door, and closing it can change everything. It is not a spell that makes the whole night vanish. Anybody who tells you it is selling you something. And if they ignore you and keep going anyway, I'll be straight with you, because this is one more spot the internet lies. The fix is mostly not a lawsuit. The Supreme Court has pretty much shut the door on suing an officer just for rolling over your rights in that room. What you actually get, the real remedy, is that a good lawyer can fight to keep whatever you said out of your trial. Which is the whole reason that recording you were nervous about cuts both ways. If the tape shows you saying the words clean and clear and them steamrolling right past you, now that tape is working for you. If it were my own dad in that chair, and this is just me talking, I wouldn't tell him to be smart or to out-argue anybody. I tell him to be boring. Say the 4 words, then become the least interesting person in the entire building. Boring people don't hand their lives away in a paper cup. And if you're genuinely a suspect in something serious, this is exactly where I'd want you to close the laptop. A 20-minute video, even an honest one, can't be your lawyer. It doesn't know your state, your facts, the person across that table. It can only give you the one thing that buys you time to find someone who can. That's all these words really are. A pause button. Air. Because that's the quiet truth about them. Nobody hands you these words when they'd actually do you some good. You don't learn them in school. Your parents never set you down for it. You learn them, if you ever learn them at all, in the one place they're almost too late to use. The small room, the coffee going cold, that little light on, somebody across the table who's done this 10,000 more times than you have. So maybe the real move was never about the room at all. Maybe it's tonight, at your own kitchen table, saying 4 plain words out loud once when nothing's on the line. I want a lawyer, just so your mouth already knows their shape before your heart is hammering too hard to find them. I don't know why nobody teaches this until you're already in the chair, but you've heard it now. 4 words. Say them flat. Then let it be quiet.